High School DxD Volume 3 is probably one of my favorite volumes in a short list of volumes. And the reason why I love Volume 3 is because of Zenovia's introduction and the fact that it goes from her being sort of a bit of a prickly individual and then her slowly being persuaded to join the house itself and, of course, work alongside them. I've always been a big fan of Zenovia going from Volume 3 and onwards. Don't want to spoil too much what happens on, because if some people are just going through volumes 1, 2, and 3 as a review, I don't want to spoil too much, but of course if you've watched the anime, you know generally what happens. But I really love her introduction. I love her gradual build up to sort of understanding the situation that others are in and why they're in the predicament they're in, and her general sort of change in a mindset. I also love a lot of the other characters as well that kind of get their little bit of touch on their backstory, of course, one being Kiba. I really feel like this volume really focuses on Zenovia and Kiba, with of course the other characters playing little minor roles, and of course the back and forth of the competitive nature, of course, of the girls themselves. And Akano, I've always loved her. I love just how, I would say, spicy and exotic she can be towards Issei. But one very interesting part about this volume is how differently structured it is to the actual anime. And I can definitely understand why the anime did certain things differently. There are some things that I like more in the anime than in the light novel, but there are some things in the light novel that I like more than in the actual anime. The one thing that I actually liked more in the actual anime is the fact that they actually removed the softball game and they put it somewhere else in the actual season itself, and they add an extra part in there, which is of course destroying of the actual stray itself. This happens right at the start of the season itself, which is a good way to bring in the distraction of Kiba. The distraction of Kiba in the light novel is more to do with the actual softball game and Kiba not being on his A game, which then ends up leading him to be slapped by Rias. To be honest, I prefer the actual anime over the light novel, and the reason why is because there's a lot more stakes at large in the actual anime than in the light novel. In the light novel, it's just a softball game, which is just a fun game itself that they're all having against each other, so there isn't as much seriousness in it. And so for Rias to slap him, it kind of feels a little bit overkill in comparison to when they're actually trying to defeat a stray, which ends up leading to someone getting severely hurt, and there's a lot of risk behind it because Kiba needs to be on his A game, which then deserves a slap in the face because he is at a job, he should be paying attention. So to see him be distracted in such a crucial moment, it really shows the importance and also the weight that has been put on Kiba's shoulder and why he's been so distracted, which of course leads to a good reason why Riz then slaps him. That is the real part in the actual anime that I felt was done much more better. The pacing is also quite different as well. There's just little minor things shuffled around. There's a little bit more context to backstory and motives in the actual light novel. So as I said before, there are some things that I prefer over the light novel than the anime, and that is mainly to do with the backstory, the context, the build up to certain things. But that particular component I really actually quite liked a lot more in the anime, just because it really set the stage. Of course, the actual softball game happens later on in the actual season itself, which makes sense. I just prefer the actual anime version in how it built up those stakes. There's also the actual tennis game as well, and that gets shuffled around, and it just kind of shows little bits and pieces that have been moved around with the anime. I understand why the anime has done it. Pacing is very important when it comes to light novels. Sometimes how something has been written down and then something that plays out in an actual animation can be very different, and pacing is very important. Manga's always a very unique comparison to light novels in how they're structured, so I understand why there is a difference between the anime and the light novel, and to be honest, I like both. I just like some scenes over others, and that's just, again, my preferences. There are some other interesting scenes as well that are different, which is of course the introduction of Fallen Angel and when he is introduced into the actual story itself. In the light novels, he's introduced while Issei and Rias and that are going to bed or are in bed, and then the actually fallen angel appears. That is very different than to the anime. The anime kind of sets the stage a little bit more seriously. It's another minor part that I prefer over the anime. Again, as I said before, I like both the anime and the light novel. I just understand why the anime did things in the way it did. It's trying to set the stage, it's trying to set the mood, it's trying to set the severity of the situation. and it's the pacing as well that's just juggled around. Again, to each their own. I would love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What parts did you prefer out of the anime and the light novel, and the differences? But it's very noticeable that the core of it is very similar, but the actual minor components are just shuffled around and done in a way so the pacing is a lot more smoother. Again, I just really like both components, but I can definitely see the strengths and weaknesses. Another thing that I really loved about this volume is, of course, the introduction with 2 new characters, particularly the main focus of it being on them, and that is, of course, Zenovia and Irina. And I love the back and forth that goes on between them. I love Zenovia so much, and I've loved her role that she's played, not just in this volume, but also further on. But I really do love the kind of mindset change that goes on with Zenovia, because Zenovia enters this volume very narrow-minded. She doesn't like, of course, certain people under Ria Scrimmary's wing, because, of course, she refers to them as a witch. And so there's this big thing of, well, maybe I should cut you down for God's sake, and there's this big drama that goes on, which, of course, leads to Issei and Kiba having a duel, and that duel ends up going very much sour, and then of course Issei showing off his new abilities. But with Zenovia, her mindset changes very much piece by piece, and you can kind of see that she does question some things within the actual church itself, and just she's much more skeptical of what's going on, and she's willing to have a little bit more of an open mind, while of course Irina is a little bit more closed-minded. She's very much deep embedded in that sort of mindset of God itself and following the wishes of the actual church itself. And so I can understand why things play out the way they do, where Zenovia ends up being the one that ends up joining Rias and the gang. I really love Zenovia because of the fact that she comes off as a very narrow-minded character, and she has a lot of growth very quickly, but then there's more growth to be done on a mental and a physical component as time goes on. Of course, she is just sort of one of those characters that has a lot of fun back and forth, and the back and forth that goes on between her and Irina is just hilarious, especially with how Irina gets tricked into buying a painting of someone that kind of looks like someone else that she believes is a divine entity, and that constant back and forth, and the fact that they're looking for food, and just their comedic moments are always enjoyable. I love it in the anime and of course in the light novel. And I think honestly Zenovia and Kiba have some interesting back and forth in how they look at things, and especially when they find out that God's no longer around, how Zenovia deals with it is definitely, I would say, probably taken quite well. She's definitely shaken up a little bit, but she moves forward and makes the necessary steps in her life to sort of put herself in a better situation, especially with the fact that the church very much underhandedly tries to cut her out because of the fact that she knows something that she shouldn't know. It just kind of shows how shady things can be on their end. Not everything is sunshine and rainbows. The other thing though too is of course the fallen angel and the back and forth that goes on there, the fact that he's going to attack the school itself, and then of course the vanishing dragon. The vanishing dragon enters, and this is something that's brought up in sort of the constant back and forth, but we don't know too much about him in this volume until later on. But the thing that's different about the actual anime and the light novel is Sensei gets brought up quite a lot in the actual light novels, only sort of as a, he's there, he's a leader, but that's it. And it's something that's mentioned in previous volumes, but that's it. That's all we see. In the actual anime, he's shown. You actually get to see him, though they don't show his actual identity in the actual anime at that point in time. So it's very interesting, the little differences. Personally, I actually like the fact that they introduced Sensei a lot more earlier on in the anime. Like I said, I think it's just the pacing, it just smooths things out nicely, while the light novel, it makes complete sense why it's done the way it is. And then of course everything ends on a good positive note for the most part. Of course, there are a lot of issues that they've now got to overcome because of the incident, of course, with the fallen angel, the vanishing dragon, Zenovia changing sides, and of course the holy weapon itself has been recovered and has been sent back. But there's still so much moving components in this that really has yet to be unraveled, which of course for those that have read the light novels will know what is to come. But I try to really focus on this volume, but sometimes it can be a little bit challenging with of course the things that are to happen in the future and knowing those, but I try my best. Overall, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Currently, to this date of upload, there is no release date yet of when the English light novel physicals will be going up. I'll be definitely making a video when we know the release date of the physicals and the digitals of the actual light novels themselves. The English release, of course, currently there is no English release yet. I know I get asked that in every single video, but I'm reading the Japanese versions, so of course I'm sure there are other ways to read these for those that want to do that, but I always say support the official release. When the English comes out, I'll be making videos on them, sort of topical videos, as I mentioned in my previous video, and I'm doing these videos to just kind of talk about the differences between the anime and the light novel. There are other videos that I've done that go much more further on in the actual light novels itself, but I'm backtracking and just redoing some of these older videos and doing these videos that I've missed because I want to talk about the differences between the light novel and the anime and kind of give a bit more context to anime only fans, because there are some noticeable differences between season 1, but nothing too big. It's still, the core is still there. The same as season 2. There are noticeable differences. The pacing has been switched around, which is completely understandable, but the core is still there. It's season 3 where everything changes, and some people have had some jokes about how my season 3 volume talks are going to be massive because there are very, very large differences to the actual anime and the light novel. I feel like I'll just be going over what actually happens in the light novel and just saying all of that in season 3 didn't happen, because it's just, there's so many differences that it's just so annoying to go over the little pieces. But I'll definitely iron out what I'm going to do with that video when that time comes. Also, as a note, if and when there is any official confirmation of a new season for High School DxD, I will make an update video on that, but I don't want to repeat what I said last year, which is basically the same thing that's kind of reoccurring. We're just waiting for more information on when the physical and the digital of the English light novels will be coming out. But overall, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What are your thoughts about this volume? Who are your favorite characters? Any and all thoughts are definitely welcome in the comment section down below. But if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe for more anime content, and I will see you beautiful nerds in the next video.